Hey guys, welcome to our first edition of the 2023 bowl season best bets video. We'll be looking at the first 11 games of the bowl season, looking at who we think is going to win, lose, what we predict the final scores will be, the over-unders, money lines, and the spreads as well. Like I said, there's 41 bowl games right now, so we obviously can't break them all down in this video. So we'll be looking at the games from Saturday the 16th through Saturday the 22nd, looking at the betting portion of every single game. Hit that like button and subscribe, and let's go ahead and get started. Kicking things off as the first game for the bowl season at 11 a.m. on ESPN. We have 6-6 Georgia Southern versus 9-3 Ohio Bobcats. This is the Myrtle Beach Bowl. Georgia Southern is 3.5-point favorites, and the over-under is 48.5. So Georgia Southern has Clay Helton as the head coach. He's the old USC head coach. They got out to a really strong first half start. They lost to a high FBS team, and then they just train wrecked from that point forward. They did end the season on a 4-game losing streak. And now they do have a very good offense. So when your offense can score points in bunches, there's always a chance that you can be competitive. But the Bobcats have a very good defense, actually a top 15 defense. Looking at the team stats here, Georgia Southern comes in. They average 30.9 points per game, and the Bobcats average 22.9 points per game. And on defense, Georgia Southern is awful. They will definitely give up a lot of points. They average 29.6 points per game, but the Bobcats, that's their call to fame there. They only give up 15.4 points per game. The quarterback position, Georgia Southern has the edge. They have Bryn at quarterback, closing in on 3,500 yards, 22 touchdowns, and 16 picks. That's a problem. They can go vertical, but they have a lot of turnovers, and they're playing a very good defensive team. That's what I think is the difference maker here. Look for the Bobcats to force some turnovers. I'm going to go with the plus 3.5. I have the Bobcats stealing the win here, winning 27-24. So going with that plus 3.5, and I am also going to go with the over. The Bobcats defense is just too good, and Georgia Southern just gives up way too many points. The next game that we'll be looking at is going to be at 2:15 on ESPN. We have 8-4 Jacksonville State versus 6-6 Louisiana Raging Cajuns. This is the R&L Carriers New Orleans Bowl. Jacksonville State 3-point favorites here. The over-under on this game is 56.5. So Jacksonville State, this is a Rich Rodriguez-led team. That's Rich Rodriguez from West Virginia, from Michigan, and from Arizona. He's now the head coach of Jacksonville State. This is also their first season in the FBS. So they came out of the SCS. They're 8-4. So props to them for having such a good season so far. And then you have Louisiana. Looking at the total team stats here. So Jacksonville State comes in. They average 29.8 points per game. The Raging Cajuns, 32.3 points per game. So both teams have pretty decent offenses. The difference is on defense, though. Jacksonville State gives up 20.3 points per game, and the Raging Cajuns give up 28.2 points per game. To me, that's where the difference lies. Both teams have good offenses, so those kind of cancel the other out, but one team has a top 30 defense. So that's what I think gives Jacksonville State the edge. They also have something to prove. This is their first season in the FBS. They want this win as bad as anyone. They want a first year finish the season 9-4. I have Jacksonville State here getting the win, winning 31-28. So not covering the spread, but they are getting the win, and I'm also going with the over. The next game that we're looking at is at 3:30 p.m. on ABC. We have 11-2 Miami of Ohio versus 8-5 Appalachian State. This is the Avocados from Mexico Cure Bowl. Appalachian State comes into this game as 5.5-point favorites here, and the over-under is 47.5. So looking at these two teams here. So Appalachian State coming off of that loss versus Troy last week in their conference championship. But both teams have pretty good offenses. So Miami, they average 26.9 points per game. One of their sole losses is to the University of Miami, but their defense did hold up pretty good that game. Appalachian State comes in, they average 34.8 points per game. So they definitely have a very good offense. They can score the ball, and they definitely can score vertically. Looking at defense, though. So Miami, they only give up 16.2 points per game, and Appalachian State gives up 28.4 points per game. So Appalachian State scores in bunches. but they also give up points in bunches. Miami of Ohio has a top 20 defense, and they definitely can shut the run game down. Appalachian State's quarterback is Joey Aguilar, closing in on 3,600 yards. This guy can sling the ball everywhere. He has 33 touchdowns, 9 picks, but Miami is going to force Appalachian State to basically be a pass-first team and pass-only team, shutting down the run game. But Joey Aguilar is a really good quarterback. He can sling it. I have Appalachian State here, still getting the win, even though they're playing a really good defense. I just don't believe that Miami's defense will be able to keep up with Appalachian State's offense. I have Appalachian State winning this game 27-24. So not covering the spread, but getting the win, and I'm also going with the over. The next game that we'll be looking at is at 5:45 p.m. on ESPN. We have 10-4 New Mexico State versus 8-4 Fresno State. This is the Isleta New Mexico Bowl. New Mexico State comes into this game. They are 3.5-point favorites here, and the over-under is 51.5. So New Mexico State was coming off of that win versus Auburn, where they were paid $1.8 million, went to Auburn and beat the brakes off of them at home. And Fresno State. So Fresno State will be without their coach, Tedford. That's a massive loss that could potentially put them behind not having their coach. But New Mexico, they could be without their quarterback, Pavia. That's a massive loss if he doesn't play. He is closing in on 3,000 yards, 26 touchdowns, and 8 picks. So not having him would be a pretty big loss for them because they are a pass-heavy team. But Mickey Keene comes in here for Fresno State. He is closing in on 2,600 yards, 21 touchdowns, and 9 picks. Looking at the team stats here, New Mexico, they average 28.7 points per game. Fresno State averages 29.9 points per game. And New Mexico gives up 21.8 points per game. Fresno State gives up 24.6 points per game. So the offenses are pretty even there. So that kind of cancels out one another. New Mexico State, though, does have the edge on defense. They've also shown that they can beat up FBS teams. They went and they beat up an SEC team in Auburn, at Auburn. Auburn's not a good team, but they did beat the brakes off of them at home. As of right now, I think Tedford not being there will hurt Fresno State. I have New Mexico State here getting the win 28-20, covering the spread, but I'm going to go with the under. The next game is at 7:30 p.m. on ABC. The UCLA Bruins sitting at 7-5 versus the 8-5 Boise State Broncos. This is the Starco Brands LA Bowl. The Bruins do come into this game as 2-point favorites here, and the over-under is 49.5. So the Bruins' call to fame so far this year has been their defense, but their coordinator, Lynn, is now the defensive coordinator for USC. So their lead on the defensive side of the ball is now gone. That could potentially be a massive loss as of right now. Now, the main guy is still there. They still have Chip Kelly. Do not underestimate Chip Kelly. The guy is a great coach, but UCLA, after starting out the year really strong, getting in the top 25, completely train wrecked the whole second half of the season. The big thing was they had quarterback problems. Dante Moore is now gone. He has entered the transfer portal, so they still have Ethan Garbers there, but they really don't have anything going for them on the offensive side of the ball, and their defensive coach is now gone. So how will that affect the thing that they were good at? Their defense. Looking at the team stats here, the Bruins average 25.8 points per game. The Broncos average 32.9 points per game. And on defense, the Bruins average 18.1 points per game. Boise State averages 24.8 points per game. The thing Boise has going for them, even though their quarterback Green has now entered the transfer portal, they did fire their coach. They had a bad start to the season, but they were as hot as anyone second half of the season. They did keep their interim coach, Spencer Danielson. He's now the head coach going forward. They want to get the 9 wins. They are fired up. I don't think they really care who their quarterback is. I have Boise here getting the win. So I'm going to be going with that +2. I have Boise winning 30-24. So going with the +2, and I'm going with the over. Boise State is a very well-run program. The next game that we're looking at 9:15 on ESPN, 6-6 Cal versus 6-6 Texas Tech. Texas Tech is the favorites in this game. They are 3-point favorites, and the over-under is 58.5. So Cal lost to some pretty good teams, but they did keep the games very close and respectable. They have a pretty bad defense, but they can definitely score some balls, and they are a very good running team. When you look at Texas Tech is way better than their 6-6 record. One of their quarterbacks, Shaw, did enter the transfer portal, but they are far better than their record. Do not underestimate Texas Tech here. They did barely lose to Oregon at home earlier this season. Looking at the team stats here, Cal averages 31.6 points per game. Texas Tech averages 26.8 points per game. And on defense, Cal gives up points in bunches. They give up 32.7 points per game. Texas Tech is not too far behind, giving up 27.0 points per game. Texas Tech is the favorite, but I have Texas Tech. Well, look at Texas Tech's running back. They have Brooks at running back closing in on 1,500 yards. So if Texas wins this game, it is going to be because they ran it down Cal's throat. But Cal also has a very good running game. I have Cal getting the win, 34-30. So I'm going with that +3, and I'm also going with the over. This game is potentially going to be a shootout, and I definitely think that it will be a shootout. For our next game, we'll now be moving on to Monday, December 18th at 2:30 p.m. on ESPN. We have 7-5 Western Kentucky versus 6-6 Old Dominion. Who is the favorite this game? Old Dominion is 2.5-point favorites here, and the over-under is 55.5. So Western Kentucky, they have Austin Reed at quarterback. This guy's been playing forever. He's closing in on 3,400 yards, 31 touchdowns, and 11 picks. So Western Kentucky kind of runs like an air raid hybrid system. So look for them to be throwing the ball. They can score. They can score in bunches. Looking at the total team stats here, Western Kentucky, they average 29.8 points per game. Old Dominion averages a very low 22.9 points per game. And on defense, both teams have pretty bad defenses. Western Kentucky gives up 28.2 points per game, and Old Dominion gives up 26.3 points per game. So Old Dominion really doesn't have anything going for them. They don't have a good offense. They don't have a good defense. Western Kentucky definitely doesn't have a good defense, but they do have a good offense. So I'm going to put my trust in Austin Reed. This guy has scored his whole career. He scores lots of touchdowns. This is a very vertically gifted team. I have Western Kentucky getting the win here, so I'm going to go with the upset. I don't know how Old Dominion is actually favorites this game, but I'm going with the +2.5. I have Old Dominion winning 37-27, and I will be going with that over. The next game going on to Tuesday, December 19th at 9 p.m. on ESPN. We have 8-4 UTSA versus 6-6 Marshall. This is the Scooters Coffee Frisco Bowl. UTSA is 9.5-point favorites here. So Traylor, who is the coach to UTSA, he was getting a lot of talk this offseason, right when the season ended, that he was going to be the head coach of the Aggies, but they did sign Elko, so he is staying there. So they have a lot going for them going forward. This is a very talented team. Looking at the numbers, UTSA, they average 31.7 points per game. Marshall averages 23.3 points per game. UTSA gives up 24.7 points per game. Marshall, 28.2 points per game. So UTSA is obviously the far better team. The quarterback Harris is closing in on 2,600 yards, 18 touchdowns, and 8 picks. UTSA is 9.5-point favorites here. That's a pretty big spread for a bowl game. The over-under is 54.5. I have UTSA cruising to an easy win. They're just better in every facet of the game. I have them winning 30-20, covering the spread, but I'm going with the under. Our next game is Thursday, December 21st at 8 p.m. on ESPN. 6-6 South Florida Bulls versus 6-6 Syracuse. This is the roofclaim.com Boca Raton Bowl. Syracuse comes in as 3.5-point favorites here, and the over-under is 60.5. So props to both of these teams to getting to 6-6. South Florida did almost beat Alabama at the beginning of the season. That game was very close the whole first half. They did lose, but they did get to a bowl game, so props to them. Syracuse, they're always that team that starts out 4-0 or 5-0, and then they just train wreck the whole second half. That's exactly what happened this year, and they lost their coach. Looking at the team stats here. So the Bulls average 30.8 points per game. They have a very good team, and they have a very good passing game. Syracuse, they average 25.5 points per game. The difference is also on defense. So the Bulls, they give up a horrendous 34.9 points per game. Syracuse actually has a pretty decent defense. They give up 23.8 points per game. So while USF has the offensive advantage with Brown at quarterback, closing in on 3,100 yards, 23 touchdowns, and 11 picks, Syracuse, they have an okay offense. It's probably below average, but they have a pretty decent defense. They do come from a Power 5. They have Schrader at quarterback, closing in on 1,700 yards, 13 touchdowns, and 6 picks. I am going to go with the favorite team. So I have Syracuse winning this game 34-28, covering the spread, and I'm also going with the over. But if the Bulls win, I would not be surprised because Syracuse always completely train wrecks the whole second half. That's just kind of the way that things work. And the final game that we'll be looking at for today is our Friday, December 22nd Bowl at 6:30 p.m. on ESPN. A 6-6 Georgia Tech versus 6-6 UCF. This is the Union Home Mortgage Gasparilla Bowl. UCF is 4.5-point favorites here. The over-under is 64.5. They have this game being a complete shootout. Georgia Tech, they had some pretty good wins. They beat up some pretty good teams, and they also have some pretty bad losses. They did get the crap kicked out of them by Bowling Green at one point this season. UCF, they were without their starting quarterback Plumlee for the majority of the season. This team is way far better than their 6-6 record. This was also their first season in the Big 12. Gus Malzahn is a pretty good coach. This team is far better than that 6-6 record. Do not underestimate this team. They will run the ball on you. They have Plumlee back. He can run it. He can throw it. And they have Harvey at running back, closing in on 1,300 yards, 16 touchdowns. So the Golden Knights will be looking to run the ball right down Georgia Tech's throat, just like they did versus Oklahoma State 2 weeks ago. Looking at the team stats here, Georgia Tech, both teams have pretty good offenses. So Georgia Tech averages 31.2 points per game. UCF averages 32.5 points per game. And on defense, Georgia Tech gives up 30.5 points per game. UCF gives up 25.4 points per game. I have the Golden Knights here getting the win. I just think that they're very talented. They have good wide receivers. They have a good quarterback. They have a good running back. That's the difference maker here. But Georgia Tech, they're known to beat the better team. And they did play Georgia really close 2 weeks ago. That was a one-possession game. They did lose, but props to them for even keeping that game close. But I have the Golden Knights getting the win, 31-28. So not covering the spread, and I'm going with the under, but I definitely do think that they will win the game. So that's my best bets for the first couple bowl games here. I will be coming out with that next one next week. Hit that like button and subscribe. And if you have any comments, drop them below, and I'll make sure to respond. Thanks.